A random passerby's dog knocked down a mafia boss, thereby saving him from a bullet flying towards him. Now he owes them his life. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Enjoy watching. The air in the office feels thick and stuffy. Taeyong sits at the large desk, but doesn't look at the papers in front of him. He stares out the window. Beyond the glass, the Seoul sky darkens, and the lights come on. He is surrounded by walls, silence, and an invisible yet tangible wall of people guarding his every moment. Today, this wall is suffocating him especially strongly. He stands up, his movements smooth and quiet. He goes to the wardrobe and picks up a simple black coat, without a hint of luxury. The guard at the door, Chung-min, immediately becomes wary. Pak Senim, where are you going? For a walk. Taeyong's voice is low and calm, not brooking any discussion. I'll call the driver and... Alone? Taeyong cuts him off without raising his tone. There's that steel in his eyes that everyone fears. I'll go out the back door. Don't follow me. Tell everyone to stay put. Changmin wants to object. He has to, but he meets his boss's gaze and freezes. That look means the order is final. He nods silently. Taeyong steps out onto the back stairs. He's not afraid. Fear is a long-forgotten emotion for him. Something else is gnawing at him. Fatigue. Fatigue from the constant calculations, from glances filled with fear or flattery, from a life where every step is calculated and guarded. The cold night air hits him in the face, like a greeting from another world. He wraps himself in his coat and walks, not choosing his path. He simply walks. People pass him, laughing couples, tired workers hurrying somewhere. To them, he is just a tall man in a dark coat. No one looks at him with obsequiousness. No one shies away. He is invisible, and in this invisibility, there is a breath of freedom. He turns into a network of narrow alleys, where the streetlights are weak and intermittent. It's quieter here. Here he can think. He walks slowly, lost in his thoughts, oblivious to the shadow that briefly flickers on the roof of a nearby building. So he places her half-drunk iced tea in the sink and sighs. The monitor still glows in the dim room, showing the project she hates. The client once again demanded something more creative and then rejected all her bold ideas. Her head is buzzing. She turns around and sees two bright black eyes, full of boundless patience and anticipation. Yes, Pangu, I know, she says quietly, her face softening. Sorry I stayed so long. Pangu, a mixed-breed dog with an intelligent face and warm brown eyes, wags his tail softly, tapping it on the floor. He is her salvation, every evening, in any weather. Come on, so he says, and the word has an immediate effect on the dog. He jumps up, twirling around energetically as she pulls on an old, comfortable down jacket and attaches a leash. It's already chilly outside, so he takes a deep breath, trying to exhale all the stress of the day. She doesn't walk along the illuminated central streets, crowded with people. She turns into a familiar, quieter neighborhood, where she can stroll without talking, simply listening to her thoughts and Pangu's heavy breathing, which joyfully pulls her forward, sniffing every lamppost and every corner. Pangu is her quiet protector. He senses her mood. When she's sad, he simply rests his head on her lap. When she's angry, he tries to make her laugh, and now he simply walks beside her, occasionally glancing at her to check if everything is all right. They turn into a particularly deserted alley. The only light here is the occasional streetlight and shadows cast by the high walls. Soki wraps herself deeper in her jacket. She's not afraid. This neighborhood is peaceful. She simply enjoys the silence, examining the patterns of cracks in the asphalt, illuminated by the moonlight. She has no idea that their quiet evening is about to change forever. Taeyong reaches the end of the alley and stops. Ahead of him is a fork in the road. Right, back to the light and noise, to his guard and duties. Left, deeper into the labyrinth of quiet streets he hasn't entered yet today. He chooses left. His footsteps echo off the stone walls. He thinks about business, about the conversation tomorrow, about the man who may no longer be afraid of him. This is dangerous. Something needs to be done. His thoughts revolve in a familiar circle, harsh and joyless. At the same time, Sohee, emerging from her alley, decides not to go back, but to make a small circle. She turns right. Pangu walks ahead, his leash slightly taut. He is calm, but his ears twitch slightly, picking up the sounds of the night. The distant hum of cars, the rustle of paper in the wind. The two lines of their routes slowly but inevitably converge. They meet where the alley takes a sharp bend and widens into a small empty space, like a tiny courtyard. On one side appears the dark, lonely figure of Taeyong. On the other, Sohee, led by an energetic dog. For a second, they simply see each other. Sohee notices the tall stranger, and just in case, shortens the leash a little. letting him pass first with a polite, barely noticeable smile. Taeyong sees a girl in simple clothes and a dog. Nothing special. Ordinary people. Part of the world he'd momentarily escaped into. He nods politely, preparing to pass by. At that moment, a beam of light from a distant window falls on his face, and at that same moment, Pangu, who had been peacefully sniffing the ground, suddenly freezes. He lifts his head abruptly, his body tenses, his ears stand erect. He's not looking at Taeyong or Sohee. His gaze is fixed on the dark rectangle of a ventilation grill on the wall of the neighboring house. From there, a faint, almost imperceptible scraping of metal can be heard. Sohee only has time to think, what's wrong with him? And Taeyong, who has already taken a step forward, feels only slight bewilderment. And then Pangu, with a quiet but decisive roar, makes a sharp, powerful lunge forward, not towards the bars, but straight at Taeyong. The sound from the ventilation isn't a grinding sound. It's a quiet, precise click, barely detectable by the human ear. But to Pangu, it's loud as a slap. It's the sound of something alien, metallic, unnatural in the stillness of the night. His sense of smell, 1,000 times more sensitive than a human's, detects an unfamiliar scent, cold metal, oil, and a subtle alien sweat. The scent of hidden attention directed here, into this alley. All his instincts, honed by life on the streets before Soki found him, scream for danger. The danger isn't here, on the ground. It's out there, in the darkness. But its target is the tall man who's now passing by. Pangu doesn't think like a human. He feels. He sees the whole picture. The quiet alley, his mistress, the stranger, and the hidden threat. His body acts automatically, his muscles tense like a bowstring. He lets out that low, warning growl that Soki rarely hears, and he lunges forward. Soki doesn't understand anything. 1 second, Pangu walks calmly beside her. The next, he turns into a fleeting shadow. The leash rips from her relaxed hand, burning her palm. Pangu! Her cry is full of shock and fear. Taeyong barely notices the silhouette of a dog flicker out of the corner of his eye, then suddenly turns toward him. His brain, tuned to detect threats, analyzes the situation in a millisecond. A dog, off-leash, is attacking. An old self-preservation program commands his body to retreat or fight, but the body doesn't have time. At the very moment when Pangu pushes off the ground to jump, another sound is heard in the silence. Not loud, not like in the movies. A dull, sharp pop, like a large balloon being violently popped. It echoes between the stone walls. Taeyong knows that sound. He knows it all too well. An icy wave rolls down his spine. It's the sound of a silenced gunshot. He sees a brief, bright flash there, in the darkness of the second-floor ventilation grate, like a tiny, angry star that immediately goes out. His mind is already calculating the trajectory, already understanding where the flash was headed, straight into his head. He feels something hot and swift slice through the air just above his left ear. He hears a whistle, thin and ominous. The bullet flies past his temple, inches from his temple, and with a dull smack slams into the brick wall behind him, chipping away a chunk of plaster. Time slows down. Pangu's leap wasn't a bite. He didn't aim for an arm or a leg. All his power, all the strength of his body, was directed into Taeyong's body, into his center of gravity. 40 kilograms of living, muscular weight crash into Taeyong from the side at full speed. For Taeyong, it's like being suddenly hit by a rugby ball. His breath catches in his throat. His legs buckle. He loses his balance completely. He falls. Not gracefully, not like in a movie. He falls heavily and awkwardly onto his side, onto the cold asphalt. His shoulder and hip take the full impact. Pain shoots through his body, but his consciousness is crystal clear. He lies where he was just standing. And where he was standing, a bullet just flew past. It all happens in 2-3 seconds at most. The sound of a gunshot, the whistle of a bullet, the dog's blow, the fall. Taeyong lies on the ground, trying to catch his breath. His gaze, sharp and quick, darts around. He sees the broken plaster on the wall. He sees the frightened, pale face of a girl frozen 10 steps away, her hands pressed to her mouth. And he sees the dog. Pangu, having knocked him down, lands nimbly on all fours. He doesn't run. He stands over Taeyong, facing the spot where the shot came from. The dog's body is still tense, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. He growls quietly but continuously, a low, vibrating sound that seems to come from the very depths of his chest. He doesn't attack Taeyong. He shields him with his body, continuing to stare at the source of the threat. A deafening, ringing silence descends on the alley. Then, from far away, the sound of a random car is heard. Somewhere, another dog barks. Taeyong slowly, painfully, rises to one knee. His coat is covered in dust. He looks at the dog, who now seems to calm down, turning his intelligent, appraising gaze on him. He looks at the girl, who still can't move. He understands, clearly and distinctly, without any doubts. This random dog, this passerby, this evening, they just changed everything. The silence in the alley is thick and heavy now. It's broken only by Taeyong's ragged, labored breathing, and Pangu's quiet whining sound, his growl replaced by concern. The dog approaches Sohee, nuzzles her trembling hand, then turns back to him, as if checking to see if everything is all right. Taeyong doesn't get up right away. He remains on one knee, his palm resting on the cold asphalt. His mind, usually cool and analytical, shuts down for a second. There's emptiness and a hum inside. He sees before him not a wall or a bullet, but the intelligent brown eyes of a dog. Staring into that darkness, before he heard or understood anything, he instinctively passes his hand over his left ear. His fingertips find something sticky and warm on his temple. Not blood. It's tiny shards of brick dust mixed with sweat. The bullet missed him. It missed by a centimeter. If he hadn't fallen, if it hadn't been for that dog, the thought breaks off without finding its end. For the first time in many years, he feels not calculated fear, but pure animal terror, mixed with incredible, deafening relief. His heart beats so hard that he can hear it pounding in his ears. Sohee is frozen. Her brain refuses to piece the picture together. Pangu jerked. There was a pop. The stranger fell. The dog growled, then whined. What was that? Fireworks? A tire burst? But it was so close. Her gaze falls on the wall behind where the man stood. There, in the light of a lone lantern, a fresh, dark pothole is visible. Around it, a web of cracks in the old plaster. It doesn't look like anything she knows. And then she sees the man's face. He doesn't look scared. He looks sharp, collected. His eyes, full of some dark clarity, look at the pothole, then at Panga, then at her. And in that look, she reads something that sends a chill down her spine. This is not the look of an ordinary man caught in an absurd situation. The instinct to care overpowers shock and nascent fear. This man has fallen. Her dog seems to be the cause. She must help. Pangu, come to me. Her voice sounds hoarse and uncertain. The dog, obediently but slowly, moves to her feet, not taking his eyes off Taeyong. Sohee takes a few steps forward, her legs weak. Are you okay? Are you hurt? She utters these banal words, and they sound absurd in this ringing silence. She stops a couple of meters away from him, not daring to come any closer. What if he's angry? What if he yells at her for being a bad dog? Taeyong slowly lifts his head. The pain in his shoulder and hip is now clear, distinct. That's good. Pain means he's alive. He looks at the girl. She's young, her eyes wide with fear, her fingers unconsciously clutching his jacket. She's afraid, but she didn't run away. She asked if everything was okay. He makes an effort. He needs to speak. He needs to take control of the situation. At least verbally. He clears his throat, and his voice sounds a little muffled, but surprisingly calm. Fine. He pauses, looking at Pangu, who is snuggled up against his owner's leg. Is that your dog? Sohee nods, unable to utter a word. What's her name? Pangu, she squeezes out. Taeyong repeats the name to himself. Pangu, half. The irony of fate. This half just made his life whole. He didn't attack you, Sohee says quickly, finally finding the words. He never does that. I don't know what came over him. Are you sure you're not hurt? You fell like that. Taeyong finally rises to his full height. He's a head taller than her. He brushes off his coat, his movements slow and deliberate. I'm not hurt. He looks at Pangu again. He didn't attack. He warned her. Sohee blinks, not understanding. Warned? About what? Taeyong doesn't answer directly. He looks at the hole in the wall, then into the darkness where the bars had been. It's quiet and empty there now. Whoever shot him is already gone. The misfortune, the noise, the dog, all of it had scared him off. It's not safe here anymore, he says, his tone brooking no argument. You need to go home. Now. His words, spoken so quietly and so firmly, have a stronger effect on Sohee than if he had shouted. Instinctively, she grips Pangu's leash tighter. And you? She asks, surprising herself with her persistence. I'll be fine, he replies. And for a second, something heavy flashes in his eyes, making her believe. Go, please. He doesn't say thank you. The word seems too small, too insignificant now. He simply looks at them, at the terrified girl and the dog that saved his life, and gives them his final order of the night. Get to safety. The silence of the alley is shattered by the growing roar of engines. It's not the sound of random cars. It's a low, aggressive hum that quickly approaches, echoing between the walls. Sohee instinctively steps back, clutching Pangu to her. The dog becomes wary again, but no longer growls, merely staring intently at the end of the alley where the sounds are coming from. Two black SUVs come speeding around the corner. They brake sharply, blocking the narrow passage. The doors swing open almost simultaneously. Four men in dark, practical clothes emerge from the vehicles. Their movements are quick and precise, like soldiers. They don't shout or fuss. Their first glance falls on Taeyong, standing in the middle of the alley. Soki freezes. She sees the men's faces turn pale, something like horror flickering in their eyes before they regain their composure. They see the dust on his coat, his tense posture, the dent in the wall. The picture comes together instantly. Pak Sunim! One of them, the one by the office door, Changmin, steps forward, his voice choked with tension. Are you okay? We heard a sound. He doesn't finish the sentence, his gaze sliding over Soka and the dog, assessing whether they pose a threat or not. His hand moves discreetly to the inside pocket of his jacket. Taeyong says, cold and abrupt. His voice seems to break the ice. All four of them exhale slightly, but their bodies remain tense, their eyes continuing to scan the rooftops, windows, shadows. There! Taeyong nods his head toward the ventilation grill. On the second floor, it's empty already. Organize a search. Quietly. Changmin immediately gives quiet, quick orders to the other two. They nod silently and disappear silently into the darkness, moving toward the neighboring building. In the alley remain Taeyeon, Sohee with Panggu, Changmin, and another guard, who does not take his wary gaze off the strangers. Taeyeon turns to Sohee. Her face looks very pale in the light of the SUV's headlights. She looks completely lost, small against the backdrop of these black cars and stern men. You'll be taken home, he says. It's not an offer. No, I'll do it myself, Sohee babbles, clutching the leash. Everything inside her screams at her to run away from here, away from this man, from this situation. She doesn't understand. It's not up for discussion. His tone is softer than expected, but it still has the same iron confidence. After what happened, it's necessary. For your own safety. He looks at Changmin and nods slightly toward the girl. He moves understandingly, opening the rear passenger door of the second SUV. Please, Changmin says, his voice trying to be polite, but coming out sounding formal and cold. So he realizes there's no point in arguing. She approaches the car slowly, as if in a dream. Panggu walks alongside her, glancing at Taeyong every now and then. She climbs in, the dog jumping in after her. The door closes with a dull click, separating her from this strange night with thick, tinted glass. Taeyong watches as the car carrying Sohee and Panggu smoothly pulls away, turns around, and disappears down the alley. He stands there for another second, staring into the empty space where she just was. Then he turns abruptly and gets into the first SUV. The door slams shut. The car starts moving. Taeyong sits in the back seat, looking out the dark window. His face is unreadable in the reflection, but in his eyes, which should burn with cold anger at the assassination attempt, there is no rage. There is a deep, persistent thought. He doesn't see rooftops or streets. He sees the intelligent brown eyes of a dog that threw itself in front of a bullet. He sees the frightened but unbroken face of the girl who asked if he was hurt. The car races through the city at night. The cabin is silent, broken only by the low hum of the engine. Changmin sits in the front, periodically casting anxious glances into the rearview mirror. Taeyong finally breaks the silence. His voice is quiet, but perfectly clear in the quiet of the car. Changmin. Yes, Pak Sunim. That girl! And her dog. I already instructed the driver to ask for the address when he drops her off, Changmin quickly replies, thinking that his boss is worried about a potential leak or threat from her. No, Taeyong shakes his head. That's not it. He pauses, collecting his thoughts. Find them. Find out everything about her. Where she lives, where she works. Everything, but do it in such a way that she doesn't suspect a thing. No pressure, no threats, no fear. She and her dog, they're under the most reliable protection right now. Mine. Understood? Changmin pauses for a second. He's used to orders to find and neutralize, to find out and report back with the consequences. This order is different. It doesn't ring with cold necessity, but something else. Something like duty or an interest that goes beyond mere caution. Understood, Pak Sunim. He nods, hiding his surprise. It will be done as discreetly as possible. We'll find out everything we can without disturbing her peace. Taeyong turns back to the window. He can't see the street. He sees that moment of falling again, that look in the dog's eyes standing over him. And Changmin, yeah? Find the best vet in town, just in case. And dog store. What do they need there? Treats, toys, the best. He says this as dryly as he gave the order to search the building. But for the first time in years, Changmin sees in his boss's eyes not steel and ice, but a slight, almost imperceptible hesitation, as if this man who rules an entire world of shadows doesn't know how to properly say thank you to the dog that saved his life. The door to her small apartment closes with a soft click. The sound seems impossibly loud in the absolute silence. Soki leans her back against the tree, closes her eyes, and exhales slowly. Pongu immediately nuzzles her palm, demanding attention and seemingly checking to see if she's okay. She kneels and hugs him, burying her face in his warm neck. "What was that, huh? What was that?" she whispers, her voice trembling. Fragmented images swirl in my head. A bang, a man falling, a hole in the wall, black cars, the stern faces of the guards, but most vividly, the stranger's eyes, dark, piercing, filled with some unimaginable heaviness. He said Pangu warned him. Warned him about what? She gets up and goes to the window, pulling back the curtain. The street below is deserted and quiet. No black SUVs. No suspicious shadows, as if nothing had happened. She feels like she's been out of her own life for 10 minutes, and now she's trying to get back into it, and nothing fits. So he checks the door lock twice. Then she goes into the kitchen and pours herself some water with trembling hands. Pangu follows close behind, his claws clicking softly on the linoleum. She sets a bowl of water for him, which he immediately begins lapping up greedily, as if he's just returned from a long hunt. "You didn't mean to hurt him, did you?" she says, stroking his head. "You sensed something." Pangu looks up at her with a wet gaze and wags his tail, which thumps against the chair leg. There's not a hint of worry in his eyes. He's home. He's done his job. Now he can sleep, but so he can't sleep. She lies down on her bed, and the stranger's face keeps flashing before her eyes. "You need to go home. Now!" A tone that leaves no room for argument, concern, or an order. And who is he that such people would rush to him so quickly? She tosses and turns, listening to the sounds of the night. Every creak behind the wall seems suspicious. For the first time, she feels the vulnerability of her four walls. And for the first time, she realizes that perhaps her life has just changed. But how? She hasn't the slightest idea. The work began that same night, as soon as Sohee's car was out of sight. Changmin's men operated with pinpoint precision and absolute stealth, as ordered. The driver who was driving Soki memorized the house number and the entry code. That was enough. No questions, no interaction, just observation from a car parked 2 blocks away. By morning, they had a name, Yoon Sohee. It was given to them by the postman, who knew everyone in the neighborhood. She was a young woman, a designer, and lived alone with her dog. She was calm and didn't get into fights with anyone. She paid her bills on time. Then came the digital part. The hacker, who occasionally carried out the organization's orders, received strict instructions. No hacking of personal correspondence. No access to bank accounts. Only open sources. Soka's social media, there weren't many, told the story of a modest life. Photos of projects, funny memes about work, endless shots of Pangu in the park, by the sea, sleeping on the couch. Her professional network profile revealed her place of work, a small design studio. By midday, a brief but comprehensive profile landed on Changmin's desk. Age, education, place of work, schedule, roughly based on her habits, favorite cafe, route for her evening walks with the dog. Nothing superfluous, nothing shameful. The ordinary life of an ordinary person. Changmin studied the papers with mild bewilderment. No connections to competitors. No debts. No shady deals, just a girl and her dog. And they were in the right place at the right time. Fate, he thought, or incredible luck for his boss. He sent a brief report to Taeyong. The reply came quickly and succinctly. "Okay, continue observation. Distance, no contact." The order was clear. They became invisible guardian angels for someone who had no idea she was under the protection of the most dangerous man in the city. 3 days passed. Soki was gradually coming to her senses. Work helped distract her. Her walks with Pangu became shorter, and they only took her along the busiest, most well-lit streets. She still flinched at loud noises, but gradually the nightmare began to recede, turning into a strange, vague memory. On Saturday morning, she decided to go to a small park near her house to drink coffee from a thermos and let Pang run around, free of leash. This was their little Sunday rule. Pangu darted across the yellow grass, chasing an imaginary bird. Soki sat on a bench, her eyes closed, her face turned up to the weak autumn sun. When she opened them, she saw him. He stood 10 meters away from her, at the other entrance to the park, tall, wearing a dark coat, but this time a simpler one, without a hint of that nocturnal luxury. He wasn't looking at her, but somewhere into the distance, as if pondering, there were no stern guards or black cars around him. He was alone. Soka's heart skipped a beat. She recognized him immediately. That posture, that tense line of his shoulders. Pangu noticed him too. The dog stopped running and became wary, but he didn't growl or rush forward. He simply looked intently, then slowly, with dignity, approached Soki and sat at her feet, staring at the stranger. Taeyong, as if sensing the gaze, slowly turned his head. Their eyes met. There was neither surprise nor joy on his face. It was simply a neutral, attentive gaze. He nodded slightly, like someone nodding to an acquaintance they'd met by chance in the park. Soki didn't know what to do. Nod in response? Smile? Run away? He made the decision for her. Slowly, he walked toward her. His steps were silent on the withered grass. He stopped at a respectful distance, just far enough away not to startle her. "We meet again," he said. His voice was quieter, calmer than it had been that night. "How are you? And Pangu?" Soki couldn't find a response to his question. She merely nodded, her fingers instinctively clutching the folds of her jacket. Pangu sat motionless, but his tail moved slightly in the grass, betraying his wary interest. Taeyong saw her confusion. He took another small step forward, but no closer. He kept his distance, giving her space. "My name is Kim Taeyong," he said simply. "I wanted to find you to thank you in person for that night." He spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather, but his words hung in the air, filled with unspoken meaning. "Thank you?" So he finally squeezed out. "But Pangu attacked you." "He didn't attack." Taeyong shook his head. His gaze fell on the dog, and for a moment something warm, almost tender, flickered in his eyes. "He did the right thing. In my business, misunderstandings with competitors sometimes arise. That situation was one of them. Your dog has amazing intuition." Business. The words sounded too smooth, too neutral for those black cars and the pothole in the wall. But so he grasped at it like a lifeline. Businessman. Competitors. Maybe it was true. Maybe this was some dangerous, yet legitimate world she didn't know about. "I was just walking the dog," she said quietly. "I didn't even realize what was happening." "And you deserve all the credit for that," Taeyong said. "You kept your cool. And Pangu." He looked at the dog again. "He deserves the best. I owe you that." He uttered this last phrase with such unshakable confidence that it became clear that for him, this was more than just a polite formality. It was a statement of fact, a debt that must be repaid. An awkward silence hung between them. So he felt like she should say something, but the words wouldn't come. Taeyong didn't seem to be having the same difficulty. He watched her, assessing her quiet confusion. "Do you often walk here?" he asked, changing the subject. "On weekends, yes." So he nodded. "It's quiet here. Pangu can run." "It's a nice place," Taeyong agreed, looking around the park. "But maybe it's too quiet here alone. After everything," he paused, choosing his words. "I have no pressing matters today. If you don't mind, I could join you for a walk, just for a little while." He saw her eyes widen, and quickly added, "It would look more natural to the casual observer. Two people walking a dog. Nothing special." He didn't say safer, but the word hung in the air. He wasn't just offering company, he was offering himself as a shield. An inconspicuous one, but, as she now realized, a very reliable one. Soki hesitated. Everything inside her screamed at her to politely decline and leave. This man was from another world, a world filled with muffled bangs and black SUVs, but there was no threat in his demeanor now, only a strange, almost old-fashioned politeness. And he looked at Pangu as if he were a hero, not just a dog. Pangu, as if sensing her hesitation, stood up, stretched, and lazily wagged his tail, looking from her to Taeyong. "Okay," so he finally said, surprised at her own agreement, "but only to the end of the park." Taeyong nodded slightly, and the corner of his mouth twitched, something vaguely resembling a smile. "Just until the end of the park," he repeated. They walked side by side, but not close. There was almost a meter between them. Pangu walked ahead, turning around periodically, as if checking that they were both following. The first minutes passed in silence. Sohee felt uneasy. She stole glances at her companion. He was looking straight ahead, his face calm, but not relaxed. He noticed everything: a bird flying by, children playing in the distance, an elderly couple on a bench. He wasn't just strolling, he was scanning the space. "Have you had dogs for a long time?" he asked unexpectedly, breaking the silence. "No?" Sohee shook her head, happy with the simple question. "Pangu, I found him, or rather he found me, a year ago in the rain, near his office. He was skinny, covered in mud, but he came up and just sat next to me, looking at me, as if he'd been waiting. And you took him." "Well, I couldn't leave him," she smiled, remembering. "He followed me all the way to the metro. and then home, silently the whole way, as if he knew I was his new owner. A loyal dog at first sight, Taeyong said, a hint of thoughtfulness creeping into his voice. He's lucky to have you. And I'm lucky to have him, so he said sincerely. He always knows when I'm having a bad day. He comes and lays his head on my lap. And that's it. And it's not so sad anymore. She told a couple of funny stories. How Pangu, as a puppy, stole an entire baguette from her and hid it under the bed, how he's afraid of the vacuum cleaner and sneaks into the farthest room. Her voice gradually grew more confident, her gestures freer. Taeyong listened without interrupting. He asked short, simple questions that encouraged her to continue talking. He didn't reveal anything about himself. He simply sat there, listening to stories about the dog who saved his life. And for him, these simple stories held more meaning and real life than all his business meetings combined. He looked at Pangu, frolicking ahead, and for the first time in years, felt something remotely resembling peace. The walk was drawing to a close. They had almost reached the park's exit, so he was talking about how Pangu had learned to shake hands, laughing as she recalled his clumsy attempts. Taeyong listened, and his occasional short remarks or nods seemed appropriate, but something else was raging inside him. He was lying to her. Right now, listening to her sincere, light laughter, he was lying to her with his silence. Business! Misunderstandings with competitors. These words were like a thin layer of ice, concealing the pool in which he lived. A world where misunderstandings, and not in an argument in a conference room, but in a sniper's rifle shot in a dark alley. He felt awkward. It was an unfamiliar, almost forgotten sensation. He was used to the fear he inspired in others, to the respect bordering on terror, to the cold clarity of his decisions. But awkwardness over lying to a simple girl? That hadn't happened in a long time. She was so pure. Her world consisted of deadlines, funny stories about her dog, and a cup of the koteras in the morning. He, however, had brought a shadow into her life, a shadow she couldn't even properly discern. And most importantly, he felt indebted. Pangu had saved his life, and this gratitude, this debt, was genuine, more genuine than any business deal. His lies, however, devalued that debt, made it seem dirty and insincere. He wanted to repay her, but his methods, money, influence, power, felt inappropriate, harsh toward her and her dog. He didn't know how to be honest without putting her in even greater danger, and he's been doing it ever since, so he finished her story. She looked at him and seemed to notice his thoughtfulness, his slight detachment. Is everything okay? Yes, Taeyong answered quickly, returning to the present. I just remembered something. I think we've reached this point. They stopped at the exit. Pangu returned and sat down, looking at them. Thank you for your company, so he said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. She was no longer afraid of him. She saw in him a strange but polite man who had gotten into trouble. Thank you, Taeyong replied. He wanted to say something else, something genuine, but the words stuck in his throat. Be careful, Yoon So-hee. See? He nodded goodbye and turned, walking away from her house. He didn't look back, but he felt her gaze on his back, and the feeling of awkwardness only grew. The next day, Taeyong called Chang Min. What's up with her? He asked without preamble. Are there any problems? Real ones. Chang Min, already accustomed to this turn of events from his boss, nodded. There is one. Not critical, but unpleasant. She has a neighbor upstairs who lives in her building. He rents out the apartment, makes noisy repairs at night, and has flooded the apartment several times due to faulty pipes. The owner of the building is a small businessman, indebted to our guy from the neighborhood. The neighbor is his relative, so nothing is being resolved. She's already thinking about moving, but it's difficult with her budget. Taeyong listened, expressionless. The problem was petty, mundane, just the kind his world usually ignored. But now it seemed perfect. Solve it, he said simply, quietly, so she doesn't guess. Have the landlord offer her another, better apartment in the same building, but on the top floor, for the same price. Convince the neighbor that he should move out. Politely. Use debt. Understood. Chang Min hid his smile. Polite persuasion using debt was their standard procedure. What about her work? She has problems at the studio too. The client. No. Taeyong cut him off sharply. Just the apartment, and nothing more. Don't interfere with her work. Don't interfere with her life. Solve one problem and then step away. The order was given. The machine was set in motion. The landlord received a very polite but compelling call. His debt was forgiven in exchange for an immediate resolution to his apartment issue. The neighbor upstairs unexpectedly received a lucrative job offer in another city and moved out within 3 days. Meanwhile, on Friday evening, Soki found an official, apologetic letter in her mailbox from the management company offering to move to a renovated 3-room apartment on the top floor. The previous tenant had allegedly been suddenly transferred for work, with the current rent maintained for a year. She read the letter 3 times, unable to believe her eyes. It was incredible luck. A week passed. Soki had already begun slowly moving her things into her new apartment. The windows there looked out onto a quiet courtyard, and no sounds came from above. She was still in slight shock from such an unexpected stroke of luck. And then she remembered Taeyong. He'd said he owed her. He'd said it with such certainty. Could it be? No, it couldn't be. How could he have influenced the management company? But the coincidence was too strange. First, the meeting with him, then the abrupt solution to her main domestic problem. She didn't know his number, didn't know where to look for him, but she remembered where they used to walk. The following Saturday, she came to the park again, half expecting to see him, but he was there, standing in the same place, by the entrance, as if waiting. This time, it didn't seem like a coincidence. So he approached him, leading Pangu on a leash. Her expression was a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. Kim Taeyeon si, she began, stopping in front of him. Yoon So-hee? See, he nodded. How's your new apartment? His direct question threw her off balance, so he knew. So it really was him. It's you, right? She asked, looking him straight in the eyes. Did you arrange this? Taeyong didn't deny it. He nodded slowly. I said I owed you. It was a small sign. I hope this didn't cause you any inconvenience. Inconveniences? She now has a wonderful apartment for the same price. No, of course not, she exclaimed. That's incredibly generous, but you shouldn't have. That's too much. For a life saved? He asked quietly. No, not too much. It's the least I could do. They stood facing each other, so he felt awkward about the gift. Taeyong felt awkward about his sign being revealed so quickly. Pangu, seeing that they were both silent, lay down on the grass between them, as if trying to fill the silence. I don't know how to thank you properly, so he finally said, looking down in embarrassment. No need, Taeyong replied. Thanks have already been given. Your stories about Pangu last time, it was nice, he spoke sincerely. In his world, simple, good things were rarely discussed. But you're not just a businessman, are you? So he risked asking. Looking up at him, she wasn't afraid now. There was a strange certainty that he wouldn't harm her. Taeyong froze. The lie had surfaced again between them. He could have evaded it again, said something general, but the sight of her open, trusting face stopped him. He was tired of lies, at least about this. No, he admitted quietly. Not just a businessman. My world. It's different. Dark. Full of rules you can't break, and people who don't forgive mistakes. That night, someone thought I was wrong. Your dog proved them wrong. He paused, choosing words that wouldn't completely frighten her. I can't tell you the details. It would be dangerous for you. But I can say that what you did, just being there with your dog, means more to me than any deal. You reminded me there's another life. A simple one. A real one. Soki listened, holding her breath. He hadn't revealed everything, but he had been honest about the main thing. He had admitted that his world was dangerous, and that her world was valuable to him. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. For what? That you have such a life, full of such darkness. Taeyong looked at her, and genuine surprise flashed in his usually impenetrable eyes. No one had ever said, I'm sorry to him about his life. They feared him, envied him, hated him, but they never pitied him. Don't pitied me, he said, his voice a little hoarse. It was my choice. But now I'm making a different choice. I want you and Pangu to be safe. And if that means I have to become a little simpler, I'll try. He didn't say, I will. He said, I'll try. And for a man accustomed to command and control, this was a huge concession. So he understood this. She nodded silently. Nothing more needed to be said. The ice was broken. The masks fell for a second. They stood in a quiet square, two people from completely different universes, brought together by one faithful dog. And in that silence, there was more understanding than in any words. Taeyong had more than just subordinates. He had enemies, people who hadn't forgotten the failure in that alley. For them, the failed assassination attempt wasn't just a mistake, but a personal insult that weakened their position. They waited. They looked for weakness, and a weakness was found. Too much attention centered on one ordinary girl and her dog. The actions of Chongmin's men, too cautious, yet noticeable to the outside eye. Surveillance, control over her home. For those who knew how to watch, the picture quickly emerged. Kim Taeyong, unwavering and cold, showed interest. Not in the business, not in the territory, in the person. It was incomprehensible, and therefore dangerous, for Taeyong, and, as his competitors decided, it could be exploited. The information was scant. A name, a rough neighborhood, a job, but it was enough. They didn't act immediately or harshly. First, they observed, a photo of Sohee leaving the studio with a dog landed on the desk of a man named El and Dehui. He was one of the old guard. Considered Taeyong's methods too soft and his success unfair. The pothole in that alley wall had been his idea. Now he had a new plan. Interesting, Dewi muttered, examining the photo. What's so special about her? She's just a simple girl. But if he's drawn to her, that means she's his weak spot. And weaknesses need to be suppressed. The order was given. Continue surveillance. Learn their routine, their habits. Proceed with extreme caution so as not to alert Taeyong's guards. They bided their time. Soki noticed a strange car, a gray sedan, parked in the same spot across from her office for 2 days in a row. The first day, she didn't pay any attention. The second, she felt a slight twinge of anxiety, perhaps paranoia after everything that had happened, but something was wrong. On the third day, when she went out for coffee during her lunch break, an unfamiliar woman approached her. She was about 40 years old, with a tired but intelligent face, wearing ordinary office clothes. She pretended to adjust her bag and quietly said, looking past Soka, Yoon Sohee Essie, don't look back. There's a gray sedan across the street. Be careful in the next few days. Avoid deserted places, and keep your dog close. She's smart. The woman immediately turned away and walked briskly away, disappearing into the crowd. Sohee froze, holding a paper cup, feeling the blood drain from her face. Her heart began to pound. She didn't look at the gray sedan. She slowly, trying not to show her panic, returned to the studio building. All the while, she felt an invisible, piercing gaze on her back. She couldn't concentrate for the rest of the day. The warning was clear, and it wasn't coming from Taeyong. From one of his men? Who was this woman? And why were they warning her, instead of just dealing with those in the gray sedan? On her way home, she walked along the busiest street, holding Pangu's leash tightly. The dog sensed her tension and walked, clinging to her leg, occasionally casting wary glances around. She hadn't seen Taeyong for a week. After their conversation in the park, she'd thought some kind of understanding had been established between them, but now that understanding seemed fragile and naive. Someone was watching her, someone knew her name, and it was connected to him. She couldn't just wait any longer. When she came to the park again on Saturday, now it was more of a checkup than a stroll. He was there. He stood, looking off into the distance, but his posture was more tense than usual. Soki walked straight up to him, without waiting for formalities. I'm being followed, she said without preamble. Her voice trembled, but she tried to remain firm. A gray sedan, outside my office, and some woman warned me. Taeyong slowly turned to face her. His face turned stony. A cold, dangerous spark flashed in his eyes, the kind she'd only seen that night in the alley. Describe the woman, he ordered quietly. So he described. Taeyong nodded, almost imperceptibly. It was one of an informant in the area, so his people noticed something too. But they came to her, not him. Interesting. These are my old acquaintances, he said, choosing his words. They saw my interest and decided to use it against me. Against you? But they're watching me, Soka blurted out. What do they want from me? I don't know anything. She paused, looking at him. Who are you really, Kim Taeyong? She asked bluntly. No longer businessman, no longer a man from another world. A precise question. What have you done to be hunted with rifles and now I'm being followed? And why? Why has all this come crashing down on me? Her voice rang with not only anger, but also pain and resentment. She wanted a simple life, but instead, she got black SUVs, gunshots in the night, suspicious cars, and whispered warnings from the crowd. Taeyong looked at her, and the stony mask on his face cracked. He saw her fear, her weariness, and he blamed himself for it. He wanted to protect her, but he only attracted more danger to her. I'm the one who was supposed to keep my enemies away from innocent people, he said with bitter frankness. And I failed. All I can say is, my power is built on fear and respect. Someone has stopped being afraid, and now they're testing my boundaries, poking at what they think I hold dear. He took a step toward her. Not closer, but as if shielding her from the open space of the square. I gave you one problem, and brought another, much worse. And for that, I cannot be forgiven, but I'm ending this. Now, you and Pangu will be safe. I promise. The silence in the park after his words seemed deafening. Soki looked at him, her anger gradually giving way to cold understanding. He didn't deny it. He didn't hide behind generalities. He acknowledged his guilt and the scale of the problem. Your power, she repeated slowly. What does that mean? You're the Mafia? The word hung in the air, harsh and alien in this quiet place. Taeyong didn't flinch. He nodded once, briefly and without hesitation. Where there's big business, there's always a shadow that controls it. His voice was low and even. I control that shadow. My businesses control debts, negotiations that never reach the police. It's not entirely clean, as I told you. That was a lie. It's dirty, and it has rules. One of the main ones is to not touch those who are outside the game. My enemies broke that rule. Because of me. He looked at her directly, without looking away. It wasn't the look of a boss or a benefactor. It was the look of a man admitting he'd crossed a line and drawn an innocent into his world. The dog who saved you, he nodded at Panga, belongs to a world that knows no such rules. A world where protecting your own is paramount. And she did it. And I couldn't protect you from the consequences of that act. Soki listened, and a strange calm descended upon her. The fear was still there, but it was replaced by clarity. Finally, the picture came together. Everything monstrous and illogical that had been happening to her in recent weeks had a name and a reason. He was a mafia boss. His enemies wanted to harm him through her. It was terrible, but it was true. She took a deep breath. Pangu, sitting at her feet, rested his head on her knee, as if offering support. You said lies, she said quietly, and now you told the truth. Yes, Taeyong answered simply, and you said you would finish it. How? The way I know how. A steely note crept into his voice, sending shivers down her spine. They will understand that touching you is the worst mistake of their lives. And if they don't understand, if something happens to you? The question came out unexpectedly, even to her. Taeyong froze for a second, surprised. Then you'll have problems, he said honestly, but I'll make sure you have resources and protection, even if I'm gone. So he shook her head. She stood, and Pangu immediately rose beside her. No, she said firmly, I don't want your resources. And I don't want things to happen because of me. I want this to be over, but I won't run away. She looked him in the eyes. You were honest. You didn't lie to me again when I asked directly. And Pangu, he chose you that night. He could have simply barked and run, but he lunged at you. That means there's something in you he finds worthy of protection. That's enough for now. She didn't forgive him for the danger. She didn't accept his world. She simply stated the fact. He had spoken the truth. And that meant something in the sea of lies he claimed to live in. Taeyong wanted to object, wanted to insist that she leave, hide, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't hysterical or brave. She was firm, like a rock against which the waves crash. He simply nodded. Then the rules change, he said. From now on, one of my people will always be with you. Discreetly, the one who warned you about the car. She will be your main contact. Her name is Misu. You will see her every day. You must trust her, as you trust me. He didn't ask if she agreed. He declared it. And in this situation, it was the only right thing to do. But his enemies didn't wait for him to regroup. Li Daehui decided to act quickly, while Taeyong, in his opinion, was preoccupied with his sentiments. The plan was simple. Kidnap the girl when she was alone. Remove the dog if it got in the way. Use it as leverage to lure Taeyong to a meeting where he could be dealt with completely. And they chose the moment. Tuesday evening. Sohee was lingering in the studio, working on a project. Misu, her new shadow, was on duty at the cafe across the street, blending in with the decor. Pangu waited at Sohee's feet, curled up. By the time Sohee finally got ready, it was already dark outside. She went out the back door to take a shortcut to the subway, a quiet passage between buildings that she sometimes used. It was a mistake. She'd only gone a few meters when two men in dark hoodies emerged from the shadows. They moved quickly and purposefully. One headed straight for her. The other cut off her escape. Yun Sohisi, come with us, please, said the first one, and there was no question in his voice. Pangu stepped between the mistress and the stranger, growling and lowering his head. The man merely grinned and pulled a stun gun from his pocket, which crackled and erupted in blue sparks. Misu emerged from around the corner. Her face was calm, but in her hands she held not a stun gun, but a small but impressive pistol. Get away from her, she said in an icy tone that left no doubt about her seriousness. Now! The kidnappers froze. They weren't expecting armed guard, but they weren't about to retreat either. One of them nodded to the other, who darted to the side, trying to get around Misa. The situation hung by a thread. The situation in the alley froze on a knife edge. One kidnapper stood in front of Misu with a pistol. The other was trying to flank him. Pangu, seeing this new threat, barked furiously, drawing the other man's attention. His bark wasn't just noise. It was alarming, a warning, echoing between the blank walls. And this barking was heard. The squeal of tires and the harsh beam of the SUV's headlights illuminated the entrance to the alley. The car, breaking all rules, drove into the narrow passage, blocking it. Even before it had stopped, the doors swung open. Taeyong was the first to jump out. His face was contorted with a cold fury Sohee had never seen before. He moved not at a run, but with a swift, predatory stride. Two more of his men tumbled out behind him. It all happened in seconds. The man with the stun gun, seeing Taeyong, froze for a moment, from horror or surprise. That moment decided everything. The man closest to Taeyong, as powerful as a cabinet, lunged at him, knocking the stun gun out of his hands and pinning him to the wall with such force that Taeyong gasped. The second kidnapper, distracted by Pangu, lunged at Soki, apparently determined to take her hostage. But the dog was faster. Without biting, it threw itself at his feet. Stumbling, the man fell heavily, and the next moment, the second guard had him pinned down. Taeyong didn't look at them. He walked straight up to Sohee, who stood with her back pressed against the wall, her hands trembling as she gripped Pangu's leash. "Did someone touch you?" His voice was hoarse, strained. She shook her head silently, unable to utter a word. Taeyong glanced at her, making sure there were no visible injuries, and only then nodded. He turned to his men, who had already neutralized the attackers. "Find out who sent them, quickly!" His order was quiet, but enough to send a chill down her spine. Then he glanced at Meixa, who was still standing with her pistol at the ready. Good job. Soki wasn't taken to her new home. She was taken to a safe place, a spacious, formal apartment in an elite building, clearly used for such purposes. It had soft sofas, water, and bulletproof windows. Pangu, having received a bowl of water, immediately lay down on the carpet, but didn't sleep. He watched the door. Sohee sat on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in the blanket Misu had given her. The shock slowly receded, leaving behind an icy, sober realization. They had come for her, with a stun gun, and if it weren't for Misu, Pangu, or him, she wouldn't be here anymore. Taeyong entered the room 20 minutes later. He had removed his jacket, revealing a loose shirt underneath, which now bore the marks of a struggle, dust, a small hole from a snag. He looked calm, but this calm was deceptive, like the silence before an explosion. "They're from the El and Dehui clan," he said without preamble. "An old enemy. Now he's crossed all boundaries." He sat in the chair opposite her, resting his hands on his knees. "Sohee," he said her name, dropping the formalities. "You saw today what they're capable of. This wasn't just a show of force. This was a kidnapping. It's going to get worse. As long as you're here, in this city, you're their target." He looked at her, and there was nothing but harsh truth in his eyes. "I can send you far away, to another city, another country, if necessary. I have people there who will ensure your safety, new documents, everything you need. You and Pangu will be able to live in peace. I'll cover all the expenses. It's the only way to guarantee nothing happens to you." He offered her escape, a clean, orderly disappearance, the beginning of a new life, free from his world and its wars. It was the most sensible thing, the safest. Soki listened, looking at her hands, clutching the edge of the blanket. She wasn't thinking about the new country or the documents. She was thinking about this evening, about how he burst into the alley, how his first glance wasn't at the enemy, but at her. How he asked, "Have you been touched?" She looked up at him. "And you?" she asked quietly. Taeyong frowned. "Me? If I leave, what will happen to you? You'll stay here, fighting this, El and Dewi, or someone else. And every time someone wants to put pressure on you, they'll look for a new weakness. Maybe they won't find one, or maybe they will." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "You're offering me an escape, but it feels like capitulation. Their victory. They frightened me, and you're sending me away like an unnecessary thing that's getting in the way of the fight. And I'm not a thing. And Pangu isn't just a dog." She stood up. The blanket fell to the floor. Pangu immediately stood up and stood next to her. "I don't want a new life somewhere out there," she said firmly. "I want my life here, without the fear of people coming for me from around the corner. And you said you'd finish this. I believe you, but I'm not leaving. Not alone." She looked at him, and there was no challenge or heroism in her gaze. There was simply a decision. "If I leave, then only if you can leave too, when it's all over. Otherwise, what kind of safety is this, if I know you're somewhere here, in this war? Pangu didn't save you, so you could send us away somewhere far away and leave yourself in the fire." Taeyong looked at her, a strange conflict playing across his face. He was used to giving orders, used to his decisions being law. And now this fragile girl, who had just narrowly escaped kidnapping, was refusing his safest plan. Not out of fear, but out of something else. Out of some stubborn loyalty he hadn't earned. "It's unwise," he finally said, but his voice no longer held the same iron confidence. "I know," Sohee agreed, "but I've decided. We're staying." Sohee's decision hung in the air, a heavy but undeniable fact. Taeyong looked at her, and the familiar patterns in his head crumbled. He could force her to leave, arrange everything so that she would wake up in a different city. But her words about surrender and Pangu's gaze, intelligent and appraising, stopped him. That would be a betrayal. A betrayal of that act, that dash into the path of death that had linked their lives. "Okay," he said finally, and the words sounded like a vow. "You're staying, but the rules are changing. For good." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the night city that was his kingdom and his prison. "Li Daehui crossed the line by touching you. By our laws, the penalty for this is total annihilation. War. It will be bloody, long, and no one can guarantee that its fragments won't reach you again." He turned to her. "I don't want to fight this war. Not now. Not because of this." So he listened with bated breath. She didn't fully grasp the scope of what he was saying. "What do you want to do?" "Offer peace," Taeyong replied, and a cold, calculating fire burned in his eyes. Not of anger, but of strategy. But not weak. Capitulation. His. "I'll leave." He said it so casually, as if he were talking about a trip out of town. "Retire? From affairs?" So he didn't believe him. "Yes. I'll transfer authority, distribute spheres of influence. Everyone, including Daehui, will get a bigger piece of the pie than they have now, but in exchange for one condition, a complete, absolute truce. No claims, no attacks, no attempts to reach me or mine." He said, "my," and his gaze slid over her and Pangu. "It's a huge risk. They might see this as weakness and attack." "They won't attack," Taeyong said firmly, "because I'll give them everything they dreamed of without a fight. And war with me, even with me leaving, would still cost them too much. This is business. It's more profitable for them to accept my terms." He did it for her, to erase the very cause of the threat, so that his enemies would become partners who benefited and lose all interest in her. They weren't strolling in the park near her house, or through the alleys of Seoul. They were walking along a snowy path in a small, quiet town at the foot of the mountains. The air was cold, clean, and crisp. "The war never took place." "Is it cold?" Taeyong asked, glancing at Sohee. "A little," she smiled, her breath turning into a cloud of steam. "But good! Silence!" Silence. That was the most precious thing. No gunshots, no black cars, no whispered warnings. Just the crunch of snow underfoot, Pangu's heavy breathing, and the distant bark of another dog. They reached the observation deck. Below, the small town lay dormant under the snow, its chimneys smoking. The future was uncertain. Taeyong was still a newcomer to this simple life. Sometimes at night, he would wake up with his usual wariness. Sometimes, news from his old life would reach him, and for a moment, his face would return to its former state, cold and impenetrable. Soki knew the shadows of the past would never completely disappear. And who he really was, a man capable of such a sacrifice, she had yet to understand. But now they were here, together. Pangu ran up to them, shaking himself off, and splashes of cold snow hit their faces. So he laughed. Taeyong, after a moment of hesitation, allowed himself a slight, almost imperceptible smile. He didn't take her hand. They didn't hug. They simply stood side by side, looking out at the view, while their dog, contented and happy, wove between them, connecting them with his presence. The road ahead was unknown, but they weren't walking it alone, and that was enough for now. The end wasn't a full stop, but an ellipsis, filled with quiet snow, the sound of dogs breathing, and a new fragile hope.